Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant, where we help managers and teams transition to an office-optional approach. Find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com and check out our show notes and pictures of our lovely guests over on the podcast page. It's great to have you here, listeners. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to episode 306 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. If we haven't met before, my name is Pilar Orti, and if we have met before, even if it's just here on the podcast, you might notice a little bit of a different sound, and that is because I am recording this from off base. I am currently in Spain, in our base there, still working, but at half speed. I think this is a moment that I enjoy very much in my year. I try and do a few of these actually, where we go to a place which has much better air quality than London. And I just bring my workload down a little bit. And also we don't have internet in the flat. So I really keep my use of internet down as much as possible. And I try and completely avoid any kind of online meetings, especially. So it's great because it really makes me think about what is the work that we can do online or that we want to do online, how much of the collaboration moments I want to do in real time, what I'm missing when I'm not constantly connected to the internet. Because of course, some people are not as lucky as I am and have amazing internet connection whenever they want it from London. So it really means that asynchronous communication and doing work on your own as part of collaboration is the best kind of work to take to these situations. Although, of course, working on online documents together starts to be not as effective and a little bit more difficult. So I think it's an interesting also conversation to have with collaborators or with team members, with full-time team members, if we start to adopt that location independence, and especially if we are lucky enough to go beyond I work from home or the office to I work from, sometimes I might have always wanted to live, I don't know, for a month in, Lisbon, which is fantastic. What would that feel like? Can I do that now? But how am I going to adapt and adjust my work? Or there might be people who are thinking of working from cafes because they don't want to work home, but also the head office is way too far away. How's that going to work? How am I going to have to adapt my work? And some people like myself really have to adapt their work and have to give this some thought. Other people, they can just work anywhere and they can do everything from anywhere and they make it work. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to say hello to you because today's conversation is a great conversation, and Stefan approached me to come on the show, and it was one of those times when I was really glad he did because he brought a different kind of conversation to the show. We talk about sitting less, which is not about moving more, and that is an important message. So we talk about, again, how to start creating a culture of sitting less in a team or in an organization. And within that conversation, we're going to change and culture, of course, because that is very important. And then near the end of the conversation, he also talks about his personal experience as someone who is certified blind and his interactions with the online space. So if you have anything to say about the conversation, I would love to hear from you. My email is pilar, Pilar, at virtualnotdistant.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Pilar Orti. And indeed, if you want to find out more about what Virtual Not Distant does or use the contact form on the site, virtualnotdistant.com. But for now, I hope you have as much fun with Stefan as I did. Well, I'm delighted to be meeting from the other side of the world, Dr. Stefan Zavalin, who is the author of Sit Less, Evolve Your Work and Life Without Compromising Your Health, and also the founder of Love to Move, where they address the sedentary aspects of work culture and how we should evolve our desk jobs. I think very relevant for our audience and indeed many, many people now. So welcome, Dr. Stefan.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm always excited to be on. And we're both standing up as we're recording this. I know people don't get to see it, but we're walking the talk. We're not just talking about it.
Well, seeing as you've brought it up, we can go off script already, but I think so any voice work for me, and this really varies because I've seen lots of podcasters and people be great on voice even when they're sitting down. But for me, I find that having the whole body behind me and being able to use the whole body, it helps me a lot.
I can't tell you the number of people that have said that to me. I hear it all the time, especially for people that do any kind of recording. But this can be any kind of Zoom meeting or anything. Our energy is better standing up. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So we're going to talk about some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff. But can I ask you first, you're a doctor. What does it mean? Is it a PhD? Is it a doctor practitioner?
It's a doctor of physical therapy, which in this case, it's kind of an interesting thing. So it's a doctor of physical therapy, which by itself is a degree. In order to actually practice, at least in the States, you then get a license in each individual state, depending. But technically, it's more of that kind of medical doctorate because you can have a PhD in physical therapy, which then you just do more kind of research. But mine is more of a clinical doctorate in physical therapy.
Excellent. So is that what you do, part of what you do, working with patients? How does that fit into your work life?
That's a great question because that's what I started out doing. And what I realized after a while of doing it is it's not enough, is we've kind of been told. I basically had patients coming in, they'll have neck pain, back pain, whatever it might be. I give them exercises. I do something called manual therapy where we do the hands-on things that feel great. They usually think it's massage. It's more than massage, but it's okay. I don't take it personally. So we do that, but I noticed that they got better and then they come back a year later because the problem was their lifestyle or something else, the way they set up their work. I was just fixing the symptoms. I wasn't fixing the issue. And so that's what kind of led me to go, okay, I need to get out of the clinic. There are many great people that already do this. I need to start working somewhere else so we can actually be working together to do a lot of that stuff. So what I bring is I bring a lot of the expertise of the doctorate, but I no longer practice physical therapy proper.
What does your work involve now?
It kind of divides itself amongst working with individuals, which I understand that's where it needs to start, but the goal is to progress more and more working with organizations. So with individuals, it's more, hey, how do we formulate habits? How do we make sure that movement is more seamless throughout the day and is just part of your everyday workflow? Because I could come in and a lot of people kind of say, hey, go for a walk at lunch. That's great, but if that disrupts your entire flow and that's really stressful to you to do, that's not the option. Bringing in a yoga class 2 times a week to work is not the answer to all that we're doing. So I work with individuals to make sure that they're finding, how can we make sure that maybe certain meetings are done standing up? Maybe you can do a walking meeting. Maybe you can put in, if you're working from home, some chores in the middle of it all. So that's what I do with individuals. But the bigger part is doing it with organizations. And when it comes to organizations, you said at the beginning, the work culture side of Love to Move. And this is the piece that I love is if we can have that social buy-in of that little group or that team of, hey, we all know that we're going to change our habits together. That is way bigger than just me working with that one individual before. So now we're talking about, okay, how does the team run various meetings or anything like that? Is it odd? For me, whenever I get on Zoom calls or anything like that, I'm usually the only person standing up. I've got a tough skin. People don't judge me too much. I don't care if they do. But if you feel that you're the only person on your team that stands up during a meeting like that, are you more likely to sit down? That's been my experience is most people go, well, everybody else is sitting. So it's finding those ways of how can we work on the organization to help them get movement throughout their day seamlessly? Because that improves productivity, that improves the aspect of burnout, mental health, and all those other things as well. So that's kind of my work.
That's great because this is not something I've heard a lot of people doing, and maybe I haven't come across the people who are doing it already, but this sense of we're going to concentrate on creating a culture of well-being. We're going to concentrate on incorporating well-being into the work. It's always, my experiences from hearing what's going on is that, like you said, it's always being seen as something separate. We do the well-being now, and then we go back to work. Yeah. And the fact that you introduce it in your example of meetings and how we run meetings, again, it's incorporating it into our collaboration practices. And I'm loving that. So, so that's great. We're actually on track from my notes, which is great. Let's go into this then. Where shall we start? Shall we start about what you've seen that might stop teams and organizations from adopting this kind of mindset? I think we need to start with mindset.
I think mindset's a perfect place to start with it. So realistically, probably the biggest block is what's the norm, what's already been in there, because that's what you're fighting against no matter what it is. In any kind of, be that an individual habit change or an organizational group habit change. And if the norm is still going to be everybody works in a cubicle, everybody's constantly sitting down, this is how the work is done, and we really frown on any kind of change, you're not going to be able to necessarily change it. Because a lot of times that's what I hear people saying is, yeah, but nobody else does this. Yeah, I don't want to be the odd person that's doing it. So the other piece is that inevitably people think change has to be huge. That change needs to be immediate. It needs to be now. Oh no, we're sitting in the US, average out of the 8 hours, people sit about 7 hours a day at their desks if they're having desk work. All of a sudden, as if I'm coming in and saying, you get to sit for 2 hours and that's it.
Yeah.
No. If we can reduce it by an hour, that's already huge. That's already huge in there. And so we can start these small things. So I think the biggest part is people think it's not the norm. And then they think the change needs to be very, very big. I think those are the two things that limit a lot of people from starting to adapt some of this stuff.
And how would you work with, let's take it at the team level rather than the organizational one, or although if you have examples of an organizational level, please add it. At the team level, how would you start working with a team to help them to address this aspect of their work life?
Sure. And honestly, with an organizational level, I would basically, it's breaking it down into teams. I prefer not to work with teams of more than 25, and really already 25 is pushing it. The reason being, I'll talk to 300 people, for example. I'll give a presentation, talk to 300 people. A select few of them are actually going to do what I say. That's not an effective way. Yes, it's great. It gives information, but we don't get the action. And as much as that may be, people are listening, they're not actually taking the action. So that doesn't help. So we need to break it down into smaller teams. 25, again, is a little large, but you have to have a cutoff somewhere at that point. And that seems to 25 and less is where we can understand that a team already has some amount of little culture amongst themselves. And usually, even if we can go down to a team of 5 or 10 people, they know how each person interacts. They know what each person may like or not like. As you've worked together for even a couple months, you kind of gather that. So what you go in is, I'm going in and I'm seeing what do people like in terms of movement. Because if none of those people like ping pong, suggesting that the company buy a ping pong table is useless. That is not the point whatsoever. And unfortunately, I've seen companies do this. Yes. I feel like I'm going to start getting a bad rep for ping pong tables, but that's a specific example I've seen. And I'm like, why? Why did you get this? This makes no sense. So it's finding what do people want to do and what are their usual kind of connecting points there. Then you can start to develop some kind of a change or some kind of a plan with that specific team. Mm-hmm. In terms of the movement piece, it's going, okay, is it realistic for you to take movement breaks together? Mm-hmm. If it's not, and everybody's remote, everybody's on different schedules, and they have a couple meetings together, can some of those meetings, can the first 5 or 10 minutes just be standing up? Can the whole meeting be standing up? Or is it just a check-in? You can do your little breaks and whatever else it might be throughout the day, and then you all, whenever you have your group meeting, you check in and talk to each other. The thing is that can be different for different people. I kind of talked about the ping pong side of things. A lot of times people go, walking. Walking is accessible to everybody. maybe somebody doesn't live in a safe neighborhood or what they don't think is a safe neighborhood.
Yeah.
So walking is not accessible to them. So it's finding those things that they can do. And the reason that I say we have to break it down to smaller and smaller teams is maybe you have a team of 10 people, but 3 people really walking is not going to be an option for them. But then you find something else that connects them. Because if you leave somebody out, if you say, well, those 3 people just aren't going to be part of the team and we're not going to let them be healthy, that's not going to work out. You're already ostracizing them, and then the culture is not going to build up the way that you want it to. So you have to find the connection points for everybody.
And it's a wonderful conversation to be having. And from the point of, connection, of getting to know each other better, of realizing that we all do different things, that we like different things, that we like some similar things, I think it's a great conversation to be having, even if at the end of it you get one thing you change, as you were saying. It's already that journey to understanding. What have you learned, or what could you learn from? What do you learn from teams when you're having these conversations? So, what kind of things do you think come up?
It's really, really fun for me to see initially how much people think other people care, and realizing people don't really care that much. People are not like staring and watching you. If you're having a one-on-one conversation on a Zoom call or anything like that, or remotely, they might be watching you. But most likely when you have a big group of people are not staring you specifically down the entire time. It's not as they're not looking for you to fail every single time of, oh no, I looked awkward on camera or anything like that. It's just really funny to me how much people think it's all about them, and they can see it when really everybody's just thinking about themselves, just the way that you are as you think that people are watching you. That's the funniest part. And then the other thing, and this is more anecdotal to me specifically. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks you need a standing desk in order to do what I talk about. And I always tell them, last year, I sat down for only 2 Zoom calls out of the whole year. I don't have a standing desk. You don't need a standing desk to do this kind of stuff. You don't need to spend a bunch of money to do this kind of stuff. And so I think that's what I'm seeing is those 2 things.
Yeah, I have a standing desk, which I really like. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, I don't stand much at it. I stand on it when I am delivering workshops or presentations. Then I use it. And then I do throughout, when I'm sitting, actually, I use it to lift it a little bit to just make sure I'm changing the position of my neck. And also because it helps me just with posture. And also, I think this is quite interesting for people who might be sharing a home space. I share that desk space with my husband. He doesn't work from home with a big WFH, but like in the mornings, he likes to do some work at some point. So actually, he's 180 and I'm about 150 meters. So he's got much longer limbs than I do. So this is something I hadn't thought of, actually, that it's great that we do have that. But I read your post and I just love the title as well, why you shouldn't get a standing desk. So I will put a link in the show notes. And it goes back to what you were saying as well. We don't need to make big changes a lot of the time, even though we think we might. Yeah, excellent. So let's go back to the teams and their practices. Once you've understood what the different team members like, need, are prepared to do, whatever, what's the next step?
So a lot of it is, as much as we may not like it, is you have to it's trial and error. So much of that portion is you have to try it. And this is the biggest piece. And you've kind of already said it. We talked about it before. Usually you have to start smaller than you even think, because a lot of times, and we can all probably relate to this in terms of any kind of fitness regimen or a workout plan, when we're going to get in shape and we're going to do it. You start with that amount of motivation. The motivation wanes very, very quickly. So usually when I come in, people are like, yeah, okay, we're motivated, we're interested, let's do this. That wanes very quickly. So even though they may go, that's it, every day we're going to stand for 1 hour for this specific meeting. Very quickly, within about 2 weeks, people start going, I hate this meeting. This is annoying. I'm achy. Why are we doing this? I don't want to do this anymore. This is actually taken away from my work, because that's too much. If we think about how long we've been conditioned to sit, if we were sitting all the way through school, because as you go further up in the grades, usually you're sitting more, you're playing sports less. And then if we ever went to university or whatever else it might be, more and more sitting. When I looked back after I completed my doctorate, I realized I was basically taught to sit for 20 years. And then we go into desk works and we sit. So that change cannot happen so quickly. So the change starts very small. And I mean, you're going to get up every hour and just maybe you're going to go get a drink. And let's do that 3 times throughout the day. Build up that habit for a week. That's all that people do. That seems very easy and very doable. And most people go, I can do more than that. And they'll try to pile on more and more. And I go, no, hold on. Do that as a team first. So first of all, we're building that connection of, hey, everybody is doing this. So now there's also an accountability piece and they're all doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then you build up from there. Because again, you might think that, okay, everybody here actually likes walking. We're going to do a walking meeting. And then they absolutely just hate it. They're like, the meeting was unproductive. That wasn't great. Okay, then maybe it has to be you do a 15-minute walk at lunch together. It's not a meeting, but you're still all doing it together. What's the trial and error? I always get this kind of a follow-up question. There is an unfortunate thing of sometimes you may have team members that just say no. They don't want any part of it. They're not interested. They don't care. Because we try to talk about this as if it's a perfect world and everybody agrees and they're always... It's not the reality. There are going to be some people that are going to say, absolutely not. You can't make me stand up. You can't make me do these walks. They're right. You can't make anybody do anything. It's true. This is the part where I usually try to find those motivations of why, because there's usually a much deeper why to doing any of this. Does it work 100% of the time? It can't work 100% of the time. But most of the time we can find something that will work for that person. Unless if they're just a completely very callous, very negative, absolutely, I will do nothing extra person. I mean, at that point, I also sometimes question, are they the best person for your team? Is that what you should be doing? What else can we kind of work on and motivate there? But most of the time, we start with that very, very small amount and then trial and error. Do we need to change the motivation? Do we need to look at it from a different perspective? Or do we need to even change what the habit itself looks like in terms of we do walking, but when do we do the walking? How do we do the walking? Or I'm giving a lot of examples of walking. I don't want people to think it's just walking. There's a lot more to it.
I'll ask you about some different ones in a second because I love all the kind of stuff. I love the body. I love the mind body. I love everything to do with exercise and with using the body in different ways. But one question, and it might not be a question, it might be a reflection, see what you think. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about that there might be resistance from some people, like with any kind of, I mean, this is still a mini depending, it is still a change program because we're still looking at changing. And I think that if there is some kind of resistance, like you said, actually, we might need to look at what is that resistance about? I would even say just make it so that the person resisting almost can resist, but it won't affect everyone else as much as well. And I think that starting small helps with that, and that reviewing and then increasing. And I imagine, yes, if this is something that is having resistance, then we need to look at about what else might be going on. This can be quite an indication of that. Because it'd be very easy to, I'm just thinking, hypothesizing now an example of someone who's just actually fed up because they never feel involved in a team's decision. And this is something that's very easy to say no. To say no to, so one way of, so yeah, very interesting. And so I'll pick you up on your last comment about it's not all about walking. What other things can either teams or individuals do to have a healthier lifestyle, which is mainly sedentary?
So, and this is basically the premise of the book, Sit Less, and the reason that I wrote it. In the introduction of the book, I say there's a reason I didn't call this book Move More. Yeah. Because we're hit over the head with this idea that we should move more and that we should exercise. And I think a lot of times when I speak about these things, I get misconstrued in the idea that I'm telling people to go exercise more, to go move more. Yes, but the mindset, and we started with mindset, the mindset around move more means I am adding something good. That's great, but that's going to limit you eventually because you're going to hit a limit with time or whatever else it might be where you can't do more. You can't add in an extra workout. You can't add in an extra walk, whatever it might be. So the other side of it is sitting less or taking away the bad thing. And that you can technically scale to infinity. Because when we take away sitting, if we're saying we're going to sit less, that may look like I'm going to stand up for a portion of this. Okay, so now if you're standing up for a portion of it, you could also technically do even less of that and start walking or whatever else it might be. So inevitably, as we take away the sedentary action, a more active action comes in. It doesn't mean we're running marathons by any means, but it means that we can constantly find ways to let that fill in the void of the bad thing that just happened. The reason I say that is it now becomes a lot easier as opposed to thinking of what more do I need to do. You're just trying to reduce whatever this is. And just naturally, better things are just going to come in. You don't have to think about all of that. So in terms of thinking, well, I shouldn't sit down when I do my morning emails. Maybe I'm going to spend 15, 20 minutes. I'll take my laptop and put it on a counter. And let me just do my morning emails right there. Great. You're not sitting, but now you're standing up and you're actually doing something a little bit more active. You're thinking, oh, I'm feeling kind of stiff and I'm working from home. I need to go do some chores. Great. I actually had a list of chores that I had to do, and I did my little breaks of sitting in between. Because yes, I sit. People think I never sit down. I sit.
It's okay to sit, people.
It's okay to sit. But I would go and I sweep the kitchen, take out the trash, do the dishes. And then at the end of the day, most of those things were already done. This is kind of an extra beauty that some people may not think about with work from home, is that you can actually do a lot of these things. And then as simple as adjusting some of my calls to now just I stand for all my calls. The great thing here is I have a setup that it's actually harder for me to sit down for a call. That's a video call, just because the setup is this way. So I don't even have to think about it. It's not oh my goodness, I have to stand up. It's okay, this is a call. This is just how I do them, and it's seamless in that regard. So those are just some more ideas in the philosophy around reducing the sitting as opposed to just pushing for more and more movement.
I love that idea of doing less. Just that mindset, than what it looks like in practice, because this is something that I think, again, for all changing practices, it always feels like what we have to do is more. And actually what we need to do is do less of some stuff. And then once we've done less of something, then maybe we can add something else. But if no, we're just piling up, even if we think everything is good for us, too much of a good thing as well. And so just going back to this sense of working with the team, what are the benefits then? I think we probably know them, but maybe beyond the ones that we might think at first, what are the benefits then of sitting less, actually?
Sure. So the one that I love, if you're listening and you're thinking, this sounds great, and I want my employer to buy me a standing desk, I want to give them a reason for it. This is the stat that I love giving for that reason. Standing computer work was shown to be 46% more effective than sitting. So people were 46% more productive. And this is with 1 hour of work. Now, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to become 46% more productive. It's the hour that they were standing. So realistically, maybe you'll be able to stand for 3-4 hours out of the workday. Once you work up to it. Nobody listening to this, start there. Start with a very little bit of 15 to 20 minutes of standing and work your way up. But 46% improved productivity is huge. There are very little programs and things out there that will give you that kind of a boost that quickly in that sense. So that's just a number, but why does that necessarily happen is also all the physiological stuff, because now you've got improved blood flow to the brain, which after 30 minutes of sitting, we have less blood flowing to our brain. So the ideal break for standing up is about every 20, 30 minutes. Not to mention that in general, your mood and your focus is immediately improved, largely due to the blood flow and due to the movement as well. So you've got those immediate things. That's just from standing. Now, say you've been sitting for a while and you just feel really slumped. You're feeling like you need an increase in energy and you're not thinking as clearly. The research shows about a 10-minute walk can help basically reset all of that. For those other breaks that I talked about with sweeping the kitchen or any kind of those little things, 2 minutes is all you need. Just a quick 2-minute thing that you could probably get away with less if you do something a little more vigorous, like carry something up the stairs and you're a little bit out of breath. Yeah, you can probably get away with a minute. But if you really want to reset, 10 minutes, or you can go for a longer kind of a walk or movement, that kind of resets everything for you to get right back into work. Yeah.
I'm thinking also that this does need a big shift then in team culture and organizational culture, because then what a person working looks like becomes very different. And I'm thinking of both the office and the workspace or the co-working space or whatever. So that requires as well quite a shift and acceptance. How can that happen? Is it just a question of role model from senior management? Is it a question of announcing that now this is acceptable? I don't know. How does it become acceptable? How do we create that culture?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So multiple answers to it. I love this
Great.
stuff. They looked at some research specifically to reduction of sedentary behavior in workplaces. Does a top-down approach, meaning higher management, role modeling, kind of what you said, down work, or a bottom-up approach work better? Effectively, I said it was inconclusive, and in my opinion, from everything that I see and what they were saying in the study is it's probably both, and that you can't say that one is better than the other. You need both, because if you have top management showing, but everybody, the lower employees don't really care, okay, then you don't have it. And then if the lower employees are like pushing, but upper management doesn't care, also doesn't work. You probably need people to communicate. What a novel idea, that people need to communicate to work together. How could we possibly ever do this? So, but I find that most of the time, the complaint of the employees, of the lower level employees, is that they go, I don't feel supported by management. And the way that I tell people to go about this is the difference between facilitation and encouragement. Many companies encourage movement, but they don't facilitate it. And the difference sounds something like this, because you might go, yeah, we're doing a great job. So encouragement sounds something like this. We at company XYZ know that movement is good for you. We encourage you to take frequent breaks from your sitting. It's better than nothing. You've given some permission. I don't want to say that that is bad. That is still some permission. But facilitation sounds something like this. We at company XYZ know that sitting is good for you. We have provided you 3 5-minute breaks for movement in the morning and the afternoon. So not only did you give permission, you now gave a very specific structure. And it doesn't have to be 3 5-minute movement breaks.
Yeah,
it
it's a
could
good
be
example.
whatever. Yeah. But you've now given a very specific thing, and people are way more likely to take advantage of it. This is the similar part that sometimes we may notice with organizations that say you have unlimited PTO. You can take as many days off as you want. People end up taking less because they don't actually, as opposed to when you're saying you can take 14 days off a year. Okay. They will take as close to that 14 because now there's a specific kind of marker to it with that regard.
And I think the culture you have at the moment is key to that. What you were saying, there's not one approach, both work, both don't work. It's like just taking the example of the, just because it's the one I know a bit better, the unlimited holidays. If you have a culture of transparency and empowerment, for lack of a better word, and stuff, then people might feel like, yeah, well, I can take the holiday. But if you have a micromanaging culture where nobody makes decisions for themselves, etc., then they're not going to know what to do with that freedom. So I love the parameters. You need and to be very specific and say, okay, we're giving you these breaks. This is the time. This is what we're doing. Yep.
So, and I remember that I didn't get to a portion of your question.
Oh.
The parameters are good, but there's also this idea of what does that look like? What does this movement-based thing look like? So right now, and this is the fun stuff for me, because when I hear it and when I see it, I go, oh my goodness. And now whoever listens, you're going to start hearing it in your life. This kind of culture of sitting part can go down to the language that we are even using sometimes, because people will go in, hey, come on in and sit down and let's talk about this. Can you all stop standing around and get back to work? Let's start the meeting. Let's have a seat. So technically speaking, we think about this idea of sitting down means you're working, standing up, you're probably goofing off and doing something else. So if you are in this kind of office environment and you're seeing people walking by or standing up by the water cooler or whatever, well, obviously they're not doing work. So as we normalize this amount of movement, as we say, hey, we want you to take these movement breaks, and you see other coworkers just, kind of walking by you, you will start thinking they're most likely on their movement break. They're not just slacking off. There's a good reason why they're doing it. This is acceptable. I am allowed to also do this. As that starts to shift, then you're starting to have everybody do more and more of that movement. But I think you have a very good point in that sense. Those kinds of things are really good to start with upper management, because then again, you're kind of giving a little bit more of that permission and that they're absolutely allowed to do it.
There's so many layers to it. It really is, and I hadn't thought of this before actually. That there's this real, whether it's a sit less culture or however we're looking at the well-being aspect of our people, it has all these layers, and we can't just, like you said, we can't just bring in the yoga lessons at lunchtime. It's a good start, because you give an option, and if it means that people don't have to rush home to do yoga in the evening, that's it's a good thing. But we can see how it's multi-layered. Now, where was I going? I was going with something. Yes. So I think what you're saying as well might also be of a lot of interest to business leaders who are looking as to what the new hybrid workplace looks like. Because one of the conversations as well that we have is, if you, for whatever reason, because you want people to be together sometime or whatever, if you want more people to be using your offices, you've got to give them something that is good for them and attractive. They're going to come and they're not going to be able to, for example, sometimes if I notice that I've been sitting badly, sometimes I just lie down on the floor for 10 seconds and that's enough. But that's when I'm at home. It'd be very difficult for me. Well, I might not want to do it in a big office, and the floor might be dirty. But just things like this, that actually in thinking about the space that people are going to come into work, I think we need to be thinking about how we facilitate, like you said, some of this in different ways.
Yes, and this is something that I've with the pandemic happening, and this kind of it's been a catalyst for people to go into remote and hybrid work models a lot more. Many businesses went, oh, we can actually do this. I think we're realizing more and more how much culture plays into this, because culture, unlike the actual physical office, is something that you're going to take with you no matter if you're working hybrid, remote, or in the actual proper office. And the amount of time I've heard people say, this job is so hard, like it's so difficult. I may not like it. It may not pay as much, but I really like the people. I don't want to leave because of the people. A lot of that is that cultural piece. Yes. And if we can provide this idea of, hey, in this, we may not have the most flashy offices and the best thing, but here we're going to treat you more like a human being. We're going to figure this out. And that goes with you home and into the office, even if you're working in a hybrid work model. That is probably the most attractive thing, and that's where everything is going. Because you can have a bunch of really cool, soda fountains in the middle of your office, but if it's toxic, your turnover rate is going to be high, and that's just going to be more and more cost for the business leaders. And as much as it may be oversaid, but it's partially because it's true and not enough people yet are doing it, it does start with kind of the leadership and the mission and vision of the actual company full on out. Because if your mission and vision is just to make money, I'm sorry to tell you, that's not going to be, you're not going to create good culture for the people.
Yeah. Or you're going to have a place where that's all people care about.
There you go. That's fair.
Yeah, I love that. I love the conversations around culture, because I rarely hear a depth going into it. So excellent. So I wanted to, I'll give you time at the end anyway, in case there's anything else that you want to say around this. But I wanted to ask you as well now personally. So you say that you became legally blind. Was it while you were studying for your doctorate? Was that right?
Yeah. It was first semester of grad school. I got a parasite in my eye. Everybody was always asked, was it some kind of exotic location? Nope, Philadelphia.
Wow.
Right there in Pennsylvania, from tap water. And it got misdiagnosed. That was the other big kind of reason to it. And the vision kind of went in and out, and there were surgeries and everything. But vastly, by the end of me getting the degree, by the end of grad school, pretty much blind, couldn't drive or anything. And so when I went into the clinic, I mentioned manual therapy, hands-on therapy.
Yes.
I was also very drawn to that, because then, oh, great, I could navigate that without the vision. Mm-hmm. And then leaving the clinic was actually, I finally got my documentation of, you are now legally blind, which just meant that there was enough nerve damage to where it was a certain vision level that it was just like, that's it, you can't really do anything. And I just was thinking, okay, I want to start doing this kind of work more. And it was yet again, just kind of this push of like, all right, it's time to go and time to do new things.
The kind of work being what you're doing now?
What I'm doing now,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's a lot of times people go, "Oh my goodness, doesn't that make everything difficult? How did you write a book while being blind?" That was not a fun part. The writing of the book was fun, but the actual physical typing it out and everything, I ended up just typing it out. Any kind of speech to text things, they don't work really well, and you still have to go through and review it
Yes.
anyway.
Yeah.
A cool silver lining is I gave a TED talk about all of this kind of stuff. And by the way, if anybody listens to this and goes, "I want my manager to understand it in a short period of time," you can send them to the Move More, Sit Less TED talk. And that basically sums all this stuff up in 12 minutes. But part of the TED talk, something people don't know is that you have to memorize a script. The TED Talks are completely memorized. You can't really ad-lib, and you submit the script beforehand. There were some people in my group of speakers for that specific stage that they were still studying and had to have their script about a week before the talk. For me, because I can't practice it by reading it off a piece of paper, I had it memorized probably a month and a half in advance and was rehearsing it. In that way, silver lining, because by the time I got on that stage, I knew it so well. It's challenges and things.
It's a good talk.
Thank you. Yeah.
I watched it. And I think it's great that you've put out there an advocacy tool that people can use as well. So how is that affecting your experience of the online space? Because this is something that I have very little knowledge of, and yet I should have loads more. What does this mean then for you? What adjustments do you need to make?
There are certain things that make it a little bit obvious, like I need a big screen. Personally, I almost never use laptops because laptops don't ever have a big enough screen. I do some of my work when I travel. I actually just plug my phone into a TV if we stay at an Airbnb. So in general, big screens are very, very helpful with that regard. Having so many things be digital is actually very helpful because most things, most text, most books, anything that I might need to read, I can have the computer read out to me. That's very easy. Having everybody be online and networking, even better, because now I don't have to travel anywhere. Since I can't drive, that makes that way easier, and for me to be able to interact with people in that sense. And also, if there's a big crowd of people, I just see blurs, and it's hard for me to even look at people's faces because usually I don't see much. It's always weird, but I tell people apart by their shirt colors and their hair. Because that's the most prominent things. I go, oh yeah, this is the person that I know. The blue shirt with the long blonde hair. That's the person I know. But digitally, that's been a lot easier because so many things are labeled. So many things are I can prepare for the interactions way in advance. I know the person that's going to be there. I'm not walking into. Imagine if we were to walk into a Zoom room and there were all these other conversations going on, and we had to approach somebody else. No, there's the person. It's easy to interact with them. But it's been honestly a lot easier than I thought it would be, but I have adjusted some of the things to myself. So I run my business entirely virtually. I do talks and summits and things like that, and that's all done virtually. But luckily, because I have a big screen, the one accommodation I consistently need is for people to read the chat out to me. So I usually have somebody else doing that. But it's so doable. And if you don't even have the limitation of blindness and you're thinking, oh, I couldn't do that. You can. You absolutely can. If there's one thing that I can say.
Yes. And what about things like, do you use social media? How about things like chats and stuff like that? How do you manage with those?
Great question. So I have a love-hate relationship with certain parts of social media. So Twitter, for example, I hate Twitter. I like the concept. It's text only effectively. It's majority text-based, which means it's a lot harder for me because that means that I have to read it out. And it doesn't always work sometimes to have the phone read the things out and then me type everything out, make sure that it's spelled correctly. So that pushes me towards a different medium. So now I prefer to do more videos than I would necessarily even pictures, because with a picture, you have to write a longer caption. In a video, I can explain the whole thing. The caption doesn't have to be as long. Comments, I know that they're important, but that's something that I kind of have to sometimes struggle through. But like I said, there's enough accessibility features on the phones and on computers now to where I can have it read out the majority of it for me. I can zoom in large enough for the majority of things for me. But most of the time, sometimes people will send me a large email where it's just basically a textbook in an email. Sometimes I'll just go, nope, saving that for another day. I'll get to
Yes.
it. But usually I listen to those. I'll just turn them on and my computer just reads it out to me. So that's accessible. But the other thing for social media is a lot of times people now do little videos with little captions.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so hard for me to, in time, get to see those captions and get in there. And the funny part is people do it for accessibility, for those people, because they will listen to it. So I go, what about me? I want to know what the caption says, but I can't actually read what the caption says. And so it's a catch-22 in that sense.
Yeah, it's another very complex area that has so many nuances and so many things. If I do this, then this happens, then this happens. So great. And when you do you work with other people? Do you have a team, or how do you work?
I mainly do all this myself. The goal is to be building up more and more of a team, but something that I've been really trying to make sure that I cultivate is that I want this to be fun. I want the process to be fun, and I want it to be almost an adventure, because I feel that, especially in this kind of space of it all, it's lacking. In the corporate world, we lack adventure, unfortunately, a lot of times. And so I want to make sure that I bring that. So any team members that I add, it has to be very, very specific in that kind of sense. But right now, it's just me. So if you decide to go and look and work with me, you're going to get me.
And once you work with clients, how do you prefer to communicate? Is email your preferred? Do you have other methods that you like?
To get things started, it's usually email. But then after that, video calls are the best, partially because you get to know somebody so much faster and in such more of depth over a video call than you would anything else. I've had a couple of people do phone calls, and I think they're better than email, but there is an amount of the way people move their hands, the way they might smile, or whatever else it might be, that I think video calls, the technology is there. It would be a shame to waste it. But yeah.
And the body is your thing as well.
Yes.
I think you're probably like one of the very few guests in more than 300 episodes who's mentioned that I was standing, for example, in the call. So we can see that. Excellent. Good. So is there anything else that you want to say to our listeners before I get you to share your contact details?
Sure. I want to circle back. We started off with the mindset. We talked about the book of Sit Less and that idea. And I use it in the sense of sit less versus move more. But that idea can go to pretty much anything. We're thinking about being more productive, doing more work, eating more greens and salads and whatever else it might be. And then we sometimes don't look at the complete other side of what are the bad things that we're continuing doing. I think diet is the interesting way of always saying it. If you're still eating the pizza, burger, awful stuff, but you're just trying to add more salads, it might be just easier to take out some of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're still doing a lot of emailing or a lot of micromanaging that's inefficient and actually doesn't produce anything, maybe you just need to take that away instead of trying to add more and more seminars and productivity tools all around it. So just think about that concept for your life. You said it very, very beautifully in that same way of sometimes we just need to take away the bad stuff, do less of something else before we just add in a bunch of other stuff.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And so what's the website is stefanzavalin.com?
Yep. StefanZavalin.com. And then if you just look for Stefan Zavalin on Instagram, pretty much any social media, LinkedIn, I'm all over there.
I'm over.
On Twitter, but I just don't post that much on Twitter. So don't expect too much from me.
And of course, the name of the book is called It's Sit Less, Evolve Your Work and Life Without Compromising Your Health. Well, Dr. Stefan Zavalin, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I enjoyed it greatly.
A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.